I think it is important for us to note or recall
Yes.
that this VAT on petroleum products
Yes.
was passed during the 11th Parliament. That was like 5 years ago. That is when the increment was supposed to have taken place, but it was put off for 2 years, and again another 2 years, I'm told, and there is now another proposed amendment that is supposed to put it away off for another 2 years. So it's something that has been in the books for the last 5 years. And talking to persons within, I think, Treasury or elsewhere, they say that this was necessitated by the demand for developmental projects, which includes some of those which I expect to happen within my constituency, Daragwa. But I think it is it's important. It's crucial also to note that these are increments that are passed by Parliament, 11th Parliament. So even as we want to blame Treasury, we also need to remain aware of the fact that the amendments that have been, or there are provisions that have been passed in the 2013 VAT Act. And but now there is an amendment that is pending before, I hope, before the President for him to assent or to direct otherwise. But I think also it's important in my thinking that levying VAT or taxes on fuel and on payee are the easiest and perhaps the easiest way of revenue collection in a country. And what I think this calls for is for those within government to become innovative, imaginative, and like Professor says, expand the tax base. Look for other areas where we can tax. There are quite a number of Kenyans within the SMEs who are doing very well, but I doubt whether they are paying taxes. And if we were to look for ways of bringing them on board, we would increase our tax base and reduce perhaps the levels of taxation. Mm-hmm. It is important that we make sure that the investors who have already come into the country, including the car manufacturing or assembly lines that were, I think, came during the first term of Jubilee, mm-hmm. are encouraged to expand and to even perhaps attract others into the country. But if we tax at that level, we are certainly going to see a few of them leave the country. We will certainly lose employment, and it has a negative impact overall. And I think the other thing, Dibao, that we may need to look at is I hear that one of the things that we would want to do in the coming days is to do a dual carriage from Mombasa, yes, to Nairobi. And it doesn't sound a bad idea. But having done SGR just the other day, you wonder whether that is what we want to do right away. I think it's a project that can wait until we have reached at that level of economic growth which can support it. So there's a little bit of duplication of projects here and there. Knowing that we have flights to Mombasa, quite regular flights. We have now the SGR, and again we want to do another dual carriageway. I think we may want to invest that money in another area, open new avenues where there is potential room for taxation, and where we can look for incentives to bring in more investors. So I think there's a little bit of thinking that needs to be put here. But perhaps as my final comment on that, before we allow another of the panelists, is a little bit more work needed to have been done, I believe, by the Budget Committee. When the Budget Committee was looking at areas that we need to invest, or areas that need to be funded, and where money needs to come from, how much money needs to go where, that is where the balancing would have been done. And I don't see the 70 billion shillings as a huge amount of money in our budget. It's very easy to adjust and cover it in other areas. Not just by doing away with the wastage, which is quite high in our country, and the corruption tendencies that we have, but also by prioritizing things and avoiding a little bit of robbing. One of the things that I keep asking is, we as members of Parliament are required, I will use that word, required, to do what they call the IT hubs. Is it in every constituency?
In every constituency.
And these constituencies include the ones in town, where there is already good coverage of. And if you look at the amount of money that will go into that aspect alone, it could easily do half of this, 70 billion. And we've been back and forth with the board, the CDF board, as what is the rationale. But when you listen to it, you actually you are told that during the budget making process, there were people who were busy robbing for that project to be included in and to be included in the budget. And when you see people robbing at the budget level for an aspect, for an activity to be done across the country, you can already see interest, and you have to be very careful of some of these things. That's one area. And I'm told also there is some other aspect in health that are being robbed by persons in the private sector. And if we were careful to deal with these 70 billion shillings, we could easily have raised it by just being careful with the kind of budget that we did. And not to say that the budget committee did not do a good job, but I believe that this is something that would have been addressed at that level. And you could, even within Parliament, I think you could see some disconnect.
Is our assets recovery